Saying hi to you folks out there on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome to today's show, Piano Tech Radio Hour. It's going to be a fun one. Another talented artist on the program today by the name of Nikki Chooi. If you're joining us for the first time, great, welcome. And we'll give you the context on what's going on today in a few minutes. I'll intro the program. At the moment here, we're going to start letting people into our live Zoom room. And once everybody gets settled, then we're going to start the show. And I'll do an intro. And if you are on Facebook or YouTube, then what you might be able to do is join the Zoom call directly. We'll try to put a link there into the chat on Facebook and YouTube so that you can go ahead and do that. And we look forward to you engaging. If you do send messages out on Facebook and YouTube, we should be able to interact with those as well. But of course, it is nice to be here in the Zoom room with us. If you do happen to want to be a part of the conversation and you're here live, you can raise your hand, you can come on camera, you can come on audio. No pressure to do that. Sometimes we do that, sometimes we don't. But clearly you have that opportunity if you're part of the program in that way. I would love to intro the show now so you understand where you're at, that you're a part of Piano Tech Radio Hour today. And so Piano Tech Radio Hour is a place where we gather every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You can also subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour, this small program that we do every Saturday for just $16 a month, and get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, as well as the archival recordings of well over 200 episodes in our member area. We're edging upon 250 at this point. It's been about 5 years since we started this back during the pandemic to support the piano technicians community. You can join Piano Tech Radio Hour at the link bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. Don't forget about the audio only version of the show, the podcast. Go to pianotechradio.com to find out about that. We're all over the world. We've reached top rankings in the performing arts category on iTunes in multiple countries. We're talking about places like Germany, France, the Philippines, all over the world. It's been really interesting connecting with people. And it's something great to do when you're driving around, working in the shop, so on and so forth. Just checking in back in on the Zoom call. Yep, everything's functional here. In addition, make sure you check out our Substack. That's a place where we publish blog articles with that advanced piano tech content, talk about voicing, regulation, history of piano, lots of really cool stuff you can't find anywhere else. And then, of course, find us on the socials, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're out there. We're participating in those ways. All right, I would love to introduce our guest for today. His name is Nikki Chooi, and Nikki is an internationally acclaimed violinist and concertmaster of the Grammy Award-winning Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra, a laureate of the Queen Elizabeth and Tchaikovsky competitions. He has performed with leading orchestras worldwide, including the Boston Symphony, Houston Symphony, and Sydney Symphony. Previously, he served as concertmaster of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, with solos featured in the Met live in HD and Grammy-nominated recordings. An in-demand educator, he has presented masterclasses at Curtis Institute, New England Conservatory, and San Francisco Conservatory. Nikki performs on a 1713 Stradivarius and a 1749 GB Guadagnini. All right, it's going to be a wonderful program today. I see we've got a good turnout in the audience, which is always fun. I don't know if you guys are hearing the entry dings. I'll get rid of that sound so that we can pay attention to the program. Nikki, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me this afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. Realize I have my headphones on, but you're coming through my computer speaker. Not necessary. That would be for show only. All right. I would love to just reach back. You know, we always do this or often do this at the beginning of the program. What was it like for you getting into music? When did you first get involved? How did you get first involved? And how did you know that you were going to be reaching for these levels that you're at, where you're, a professional, you're, at top universities and concert halls and things like that?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Victoria, British Columbia, in Canada. My parents, they're both Chinese Indonesian, Chinese Malaysian, and they kind of met in the city of Victoria through, they study at the local university there. And just growing up, my parents wanted me to kind of be um, they wanted me to have a lot of hobbies. They wanted me to expose me to several things. So I was involved in sports, mainly soccer and baseball. Music was one of them, art, gymnastics, and for some reason, music just kind of I had a knack for it. And if you learn quickly, you develop motivation, and then you kind of stand out from the rest of the crowd. So it was almost like it was a healthy space for me to kind of grow and learn and feel I guess feel a sense of friendship, with all the other violin students at that time. I started with the Suzuki at the Suzuki method at the local conservatory, and just throughout elementary school and even middle school, it was literally a hobby. I would, have my, I would go to school and attend lessons, theory class, group lessons once or twice a week during the school year. And I would say it wasn't until I was 14 years old when I was invited to attend a week-long seminar held at the Juilliard School. It was called the Starling Delay Symposium. And, coming from, a small West Coast city and being in New York City for the first time, it was mind blowing for me. And, I got to meet Itzhak Perlman, one of the revered violinists of our times. Don Weilerstein, who I eventually studied with during my university studies, and David Kim, concertmaster of the Philadelphia Orchestra. So, being around other students who, were really driven to have music as a career, that kind of got me inspired to pursue that passion. It was there when I told my dad. I was like, oh, I want to just stay in New York City and not go back. But obviously, I had to finish high school and all that. So upon finishing high
You didn't
school,
have to. I mean,
that's true.
but
That's
yeah,
true.
that's what you
No,
did.
yeah. But I mean, I think, looking back at it, I'm glad my parents, there are students out there who, decide to go to pre-college at Juilliard and, get a head start with it. But I'm glad that I finished school, in a a pretty normal setting and all that, just so I've been there, done that. Then I can pursue what I wanted to do.
Doesn't seem to have hurt
Um,
you.
what's that?
It doesn't seem to have hurt you to have not, stayed in New York City.
Sure, sure.
Wonderful accomplishments. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that was the turning point where I decided to pursue music. And upon finishing high school, I attended the Curtis Institute of Music for 5 years there, studied, with Joey Silverstein, Ida Kavafian, and met a lot of, wonderful, wonderful peers that I still, have relationships with, professional relationships or friendships with. And that was really great. Then I went to Juilliard for my master's after that. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, we actually had, I'm trying to think of her name. We had a guest, a wonderful young pianist, who did the opposite, I think.
Hmm.
Her parent, I think she was from China,
Hmm.
and but living in different places. I'm trying to put my memory together. And then she did come to New York City, and her parents, I think her mom stayed in New York with her too. She did the Juilliard pre-college thing, and and kind of started kind of growing as a musician from that point. So you have
Yeah.
another perspective on how that happens. That does happen sometimes.
Sure. It happens a lot of times too. So, and a lot of success stories as well, for sure.
Um, Wonderful. Well, thank you for that background. I mean, I would love to share. I've been looking aside here because I'm getting it set up. I would love to share some of your performance here.
Sure.
And then we have this lovely performance that's labeled here on YouTube, Chrysler La Gitana. Is there anything you'd like to say before we give a clip of it, or should we just kind of let it speak for itself?
Sure. Fritz Kreisler, great Viennese violinist at the turn of the 20th century. He was known for these short little compositions that serve really well as encores. And once you give a big recital, and then you just want to give people a little treat, that's the piece to. And his compositions are well suited for that. So this is in kind of like the Hungarian gypsy style. So you'll hear a little bit of that flair.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll have a little bit of dessert as our appetizer, as it were.
Exactly.
Let's get this going. Let me know if there's any issues with the sound. It should be good to go. Wonderful. Bravo.
Thank you.
Where was this recorded? Under what scenario?
Sure. So that was actually a COVID-19 pandemic project.
Okay.
That was one of the first things I did after lockdown. It was recorded in New York City at Merkin Hall at the Kaufman Center.
Okay.
And it was recorded through, I guess, a partnership with the Violin Channel, a very prominent news source and social media presence for classical music. So they they did a bunch of these recordings for various artists. And the pianist Michelle Can, she's a good friend of mine. We were at school together at Curtis, and she now performed, all over the world, and she's also on faculty at Curtis. So it was a good way to, it was one of the first performances or recordings that I did during that time. So
And
yeah.
was there an audience there,
No,
or?
it was just an empty hall.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, right.
yeah,
Because I was like, I was
yeah,
waiting for the years, like this is
yeah,
the encore, and I was waiting for this applause. I was like, guys, it's been quiet.
yeah, yeah.
But a wonderful performance, and I feel like you know, one thing that you have that not a lot of you can't always find in performers is you've got this uh, special combination of musical talent, expressiveness, interpretation, and the sort of stage presence and the flair, right? The watching you perform is its own experience. And I'm just curious to ask you about that. I mean, is it something where it's just, you're just playing the music and it's what you feel, or is it something where, you've had to work to develop, your stage presence and the way that you perform the music?
Sure. I mean, when we watch a concert, a performance, whether it's a recital or something with orchestra or even chamber music as an ensemble, the reason people attend concert is to enjoy the whole experience, right? Not just listening. Listening, you can find a recording and, it's great sound quality, but you want to be there for the experience. And of course, as musicians, we're not there to give a dramatic acting performance or anything, but there's a visual component to add to that as well, to enhance the, I guess, the overall audio experience, right? And for better or for worse, we do listen with our eyes at times, and it's part of the whole package. And I feel like, I don't know if I work to develop stage presence, but it's definitely something that I do think about, and to be able to connect with audiences, communicate in a way. And so it's almost a symbiotic relationship, depending on the audience, the hall, the size of the room, how I interact with the music. The music serves as, a conduit between performer and audience, and it differs from place to place, time to time, and depending on the repertoire as well. So, yeah,
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing about that.
of course.
Um, Tell me more about your experiences in sort of developing your career in education and things. So we mentioned Juilliard, we mentioned Curtis. Um, Tell us about your studies and the things that you may have picked up there, and kind of how they developed. I know there's different types of studies, right? There's studies where honestly, it's just like they were saying, you get to practice as much as you want, take lessons with who you want. Some people are writing dissertations on specific pieces or studying specific composers. What was your educational experience like?
Sure, sure. Great question. I would say my 5 years at Curtis, it was a very intensive practical experience. So what I mean by that is, there's a lot of information poured into me, whether it's through my private teachers, chamber music groups. I was involved with, several in a given semester. Orchestra was very intensive as well. We worked with this wonderful conducting teacher, Otto Werner Mueller, and I learned so much from, just studying, these great symphonic works. Um, so I would say, my time at Curtis was just a lot of information poured in. There wasn't enough bandwidth for me to kind of sort it out, but I was just trying to just take it all in, and I feel like when I was at Juilliard, that's when I was able to process a little bit more. It's a bigger school, it's New York City. You have a bit more, not so much freedom, but there's, you have the freedom to, I guess, explore a little bit more. And that's where I kind of found a little bit more of my identity and just try to consolidate what works, what doesn't, experiment a little bit. And of course, New York City itself, I got to watch, productions at the Met, New York Phil concerts, some of the greatest artists that come by to watch concerts at Carnegie. So it was more of the experience overall that I had in New York City. So that's how
Yes.
I would recap the two schools that I attended.
Yeah, absolutely. And I lived in New York City for a while. I also have a piano tuning business in New York.
Mm,
So we're always coming into contact with, artists and the music scene out there as well. I absolutely love New York. I miss it a lot. I'm in the Chicago area right now.
I see.
Um, but yeah, I would love to dive deeper there and just talk about your experience of being in New York. So, how many years total was it when you were living in New York, and where do you live now?
So right now I'm based out of Buffalo, New York. This is where
Okay.
I've been for the past 5+ years. But living in New York, I had two stints and two short stints. 2 years when I was doing my master's at Juilliard, and then I was living in Philly after that. Then back to New York when I was concertmaster at the Met.
Hmm.
And I guess New York is somewhere is this it's so vibrant. It's everybody goes through it. The so much energy to it, and there's no other place like the city of New York. And then as artists, especially when I was at school, it was very it really opened my mind up to so many possibilities, what the extreme of things that I can do artistically, professionally as well. And I guess it was a progression, coming from the West Coast, smaller city in Victoria, Philly, even though it's a big city, has a small city kind of vibe, and then to New York. So I kind of, progressed in that way, from small to very big, the Big Apple.
Mhm. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Philly's small compared to New York.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a big place.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear about that too. Philadelphia is also a place that I love and have been,
Yeah.
I never lived there, but I've spent quite a bit of time there.
Hmm.
And and I'm curious if there's anything else to add about Philadelphia. In terms of, I guess let's go back to New York. Where did you get to live? Were you living in Manhattan? Were you living in Brooklyn or the
Yeah.
Queens or something
I
like?
was I was living quite near school, in a small studio,
Oh
just
wow,
just just
yeah,
so it was convenient
centrally
for me.
located.
Yeah, centrally located. So it was
Amazing.
really wonderful. I could, if I could get a rush ticket to one of the concerts, if I feel like, oh, I have, a free evening, I could just, jump off and watch Gil Shaham play Prokofiev concerto at Carnegie Hall. Did that a few times. It was really great to be in the middle of things.
Wonderful. And then what
Mhm.
about Philadelphia? Where did you end up kind of settling? And I don't know much about kind of the classical musical cultural experience in Philadelphia. I know some other things about the cultural experience. I know they have like, I think probably still like the most murals of any city, which I've always loved that about
Sure.
Philadelphia, how they have that artistic culture just painted all over the city. But yeah,
Yeah.
anything else to share about especially
Oh,
the classical scene there?
yeah. I love Philadelphia. It's for me. I mean, it's kind of like the home away from home. Like I still feel like every time I'm in Philly, that's home to me because maybe I spent, my most formative years there. I guess in terms of classical music wise, it certainly revolves around Curtis, the school there, and then the Philadelphia Orchestra, obviously one of the greatest orchestras in the world. The Philadelphia Chamber Music series is really prominent. They bring, wonderful, wonderful artists. And the opera as well. They do some really interesting productions there, which is really cool. So Philly has its own scene as well. It's very much its own thing, but at the same time, it's really well located. That if you want to check out a production in New York, it's only an hour and a half by train, right? So it's very accessible to New York City as well. So
Yeah.
yeah,
You better take the train too,
yeah,
otherwise. If you try to
yeah,
drive, it's going to take you 10 times as long.
exactly.
I'll say also, I just want to welcome an audience member who sometimes appears, but not always, is Wayne Ferguson. I don't know if you know Wayne, but he's a fellow Canadian. So
Ah,
it's fun to
fellow
have
Canadians.
Canadian representing. I don't know. We may have other Canadians here too. I don't know. If you're Canadian, raise your hand. But yeah, Wayne's a wonderful guy who has worked with some of the best in performances in
Oh,
Canada as well.
wonderful.
Yeah, as a piano
Wonderful.
technician.
Okay, okay, cool.
Um, let's talk about pianos. Do you have, you don't have to, but this
Yeah.
is a sort of piano focused program. What's been your experience with pianos? Did you ever take a few lessons? You said you have some good relationships with pianists as far as collaborative situations go. What's your relationship to the piano?
My relationship to the piano. Well, I certainly did take lessons growing up through my time at Curtis as well. And, I always have a deep admiration for all pianists. The first of all, my talent is not channeled in that direction. I've done my skills at etudes. It hasn't gotten me very far, so I can definitely respect. Especially I guess one thing that I have this I wish I can have on the violin is the possibility of taking large symphonic works and being able to kind of reduce it on the piano. It's whether it's Firebird or Petrushka, it's possible to do, whether it's two hands or four hands, the ability to create such wide ranging colors, whether it's tonally or whatever it may be size wise, it's possible to do on the piano, whereas violins there's only four strings. So we have our own repertoire, our own things that we were able to do, but that's something I just wish I had access to. So
Mhm. Yes,
yeah.
you can lead the orchestra, but you can't
Yes.
be the orchestra.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah.
Well,
And
yeah,
is your background, are you a pianist yourself or?
yeah. So I kind of came up studying piano,
Yeah.
and kind of similar to you, I started to get more serious about it in my teens.
Okay.
But it was more playing in some bands, picking up jazz, and I always felt pretty connected to it. I remember telling my piano teacher in high school I was thinking of going studying in college, and she was like, "Nah, I don't know if you need to," but I but I uh but I ended up doing that anyways. I kind of like had this big shift. I went to school for some, physics my first year, and I was practicing. I would go to the practice rooms of this small college called Wake Forest
Sure.
College outside of Chicago, and I would fall asleep practicing the piano, I would sneak in the practice rooms at night. I want to sound like Herbie
Wow.
Hancock. And I just then decided I'd go to music school. So I studied jazz. I studied jazz piano
Oh,
and
wonderful.
picked up a little bit of the classical domain along the way. But improvisation, composition, and jazz have kind of been my focus there. Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. Really wonderful.
But yeah, New York's a wonderful place to be for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And but I always kind of my connection with the piano is I would almost say reluctant. I was always jealous of the other instruments in many ways. The guitar players seemed a little
Oh
bit
yeah.
cooler, you know, and other instruments are so much more portable.
Right.
But
Sure,
I've
sure,
grown to love. I would love
sure.
to hear from you about your sort of masterclass and teaching experience.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
do you feel that you bring to the table that seems unique, as you interface with students and people are coming to you for lessons? Do you feel like there's moments where you're gravitating toward, I want to teach you this is something I feel like I can communicate, or it naturally happens where they're saying, oh wow, nobody ever, taught it to me that way.
Hmm. Um, I would say my approach to teaching is I try to be as individualistic as possible. So, there might be a set way that I've, learned through my own mentors. But what I learned through, navigating, my time after school is that you got to find your own way of developing, your own way of doing things, and some things works with some people and some things don't, and the best way is to really find what your strengths are and to capitalize on that, and to I guess hone your weaknesses so that they're not the forefront of I guess your limitations. So if a student comes to me with a certain issue, let's say, right hand, maybe they have a good sound already, but it doesn't look quite, right or something. I try to not mess too much with that. I want to prevent them from, let's say, a hindrance through, injury or something. But, if it works for them, I'll let it be. Yeah, I'll only interfere if there's something that potentially might be chronic further down the line. So that's my approach to it, and it's through, I guess, just when I was a student, I had a lot of pain on my back and my shoulders, and I've tried to address it a lot of times, and had teachers, give me suggestions and all that. I mean, obviously, all these comments were completely valid and useful, but it wasn't until I actually stepped away from school where I actually learned a little bit more about how my own body works, that I was able to address these. And since then, as long as I keep remembering it, haven't had any issues. So
Hmm.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's a very fascinating aspect of the human body in general, right? There's two very contradictory aspects. I mean, number one, it's your body, it's your
Yeah.
brain, you should kind of understand probably how it works the best. But then there's a total opposite where you know what, you don't, right? Like a
Yeah.
doctor knows how your liver works better than
Exactly.
you do. But you have to balance those type of things.
Totally.
And there are those moments where listening to your intuition and saying, hey, this is my instrument here, meaning my body is my instrument, and maybe I could intuit a thing or two. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a delicate mix.
for sure. For sure. And another
Um,
aspect into teaching as well is that, for me, at least for how my career has kind of spanned out, is you never know. Don't pigeonhole yourself too much into one thing or another. And the best way to approach learning, especially as a student, is to keep an open mind while also developing so that you're able to adapt as much as possible, whether it's solo playing, chamber music, teaching, orchestra playing, opera, symphonic, so you make the best, you develop the skills necessary for whatever may come upon you in the future. So that's something
mhm.
I try to share with my students as well, that that be prepared for anything. So yeah.
Yes, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, especially in today's climate, right? Everything's changing every day about
Totally.
how people consume,
Yep.
art and music, and how it's delivered and what people appreciate, the changing of the styles and things. That was something I want to dive deeper into. Hopefully I'll have a little bit more to say. If you don't, it's fine. But you know, the people like yourself that we come across who I would describe as successful musicians, it's really varied as to how you become successful these days. And how I would describe your career, you can also put your own labels if you want to on it. You
Sure.
have one advantage of having a bit of the more traditional aspects working for you in your career.
Hmm.
I'm going to go on the stage, I'm going to go to the conservatories, it's not going to be about, just building a YouTube channel from scratch or something like that, or doing something that's more geared towards the more modern approaches or very specific technology wise. And at the same time, you know, you clearly have had to and have had successfully adapted to the current environment. Like you said, you're versatile. You may, like we saw, you've develop the ability to not just perform at a concert hall, but connect in a way where you can have an excellent recording of something like that people can share and get spread widely. You can come on a podcast and speak with people. So what has been your approach, whether it's conscious or maybe some things have evolved naturally to your career, to
Yeah.
becoming successful in the way that you want to be?
Sure. No, this is a wonderful topic to talk about. Um, obviously when you play in the traditional setting, in a concert hall, there's, the audience. Once social media and, the internet space became available, your access to a lot more eyes and ears suddenly, was quadrupled or even more so, tenfold. So it's a way to connect with even more peoples. And obviously, the way we portray ourselves is, in a very controlled setting, right? You get to choose what you want to put out there, what you want to say. So if anything, we have a lot more control to how we want to show ourselves to whoever's out there looking at our content. And I think I can definitely do quite a bit more, take advantage of that space more. It does take, a certain mindset, a certain time to do that, to put content out there. But I think it's a great thing that artists are embracing, because that's just another way of connecting with more of your audience, more of your fans, so that when you do play in the concert hall, you can hopefully bring them together in that space as well. And how that has helped me in my career is honestly just connecting with people that I would say was not possible to connect in the past. I've had, whether it's students or other professionals from another corner of the world, reach out and say, "Oh, can you come and maybe work with my students online?" From Asia or in Germany or something like that. So possibilities and networks, were made possible that weren't before if we didn't use the internet space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
In terms of, uh, you know, in, uh, in terms of the way that you think about the state of classical music these days, right? It's a
Yeah.
very interesting domain, especially like as myself as building this program, we've leaned in a little bit more into the classical domain because that seems to connect a little bit more with the acoustic piano, which is like one of our focuses, right? Um, if you have appreciation for the acoustic as opposed to the digital piano, it might be more in the classical domain.
Sure.
Um, and so it's interesting to see, there is I would say, a rabid fan following of classical music that's very vibrant, online. You could find these, Instagram channels or YouTube channels where it's just like whatever, it's classical clips or something, and people just they get really excited about it. But it's a different space. And also, you might call it concert music as opposed to classical music, right? Because there's modern compositions. How do you approach what you might call classical music or concert music, which would include modern compositions, and sort of your experience of it, but also how you try to share it with others, how you try to introduce people to it, how you'd like them to think about it?
Sure. Let me see. Like, you're totally right, and classical music can be somewhat of a genre in terms, because, like you said, there are live composers today who we're not just listening to music of hundreds of years old. Where there are current composers who write in, for the classical music genre, modern concertos, modern symphonic stuff. So it's a little tricky to label this kind of music. So maybe concert music is the way to go. For me, it's definitely an acquired taste, but at the same time, I've had audience members who've never attended classical music and they attend a concert for the first time, they're sometimes shocked by how how approachable it is. It's music that's timeless, and you know music, I think there's a to some point, there's you can only reinvent the wheel so many times. There's a structure to it, there's a harmonic progression to it. Sure, maybe some composers kind of delve off a little bit, but then at the center of this genre, it's there's a certain structure to it, right? And I think how I try to pull people in is to watch us musicians, perform these works together, and how we communicate it to the audience. So how we interact on stage. So it's more of a social experience, and to especially if you experience it with friends or a group of people. I think it's a really cool thing to be able to attend a classical music concert and to talk about it. Oh, did you see the trumpets do that when during Shasti 5, or did you see this high stuff that the violinists play and Strauss Don 1, or stuff like that. I don't know, just things that you can kind of visually see as well, just as a whole experience. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great answer. It's a good segue to maybe check out another recording.
Sure.
I know, let me bring this up here. So we have another one, which is a more ensemble type of scenario. The Geminiani La Folia Variations. And this is a slightly larger group. It's not a full orchestra. The last one was a duo, of course. And it looks like we have a harpsichord or pianoforte here too, which is kind of a cool element. Do you want to give a little bit of a background here and we'll take a listen?
Yeah, so it's with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra, and you'll see two violinists kind of be in the center, and the other violinist is my brother. His name's Timothy, and we're both violinists, and we both have pretty distinct careers. I'm in the orchestra world. He teaches and travels internationally, but a portion of every year we always play together as two violinists, and it's always fun. It's very captivating for the audience as well, because as brothers we kind of do this together. So we're very close as collaborators and also brothers. So you'll hear that kind of battle between us in the video to come.
Yeah, let's check this out. So, and just to clarify then, so who's that?
That's my brother there, Timmy.
That's your brother.
Yeah.
And you're over here.
And I'm over on the other side. Yeah, exactly. Right there.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's check this out. every time I thought it was a good time to stop, I had to listen to the next part.
That was a good time to stop.
Yeah, that
That
was
was
great.
great.
That was great. Yeah, I would have to say that rocks. I would. It rocks in a way, you know.
Yeah, no, there's a certain rhythmic drive in that work, and it was written in the 1600s, and the fact that it's powerful in that way is it speaks to the timelessness of it.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, specifically. Yeah, it's fun. Like the more it was great to also listen to it and watch to it, just with that slight little context of that's you and your brother playing it too, And you mentioned like a battle, right? And it's like it's there's not necessarily a battle, but there is sort of like that feeling in the music and but you're playing like the same lines at times and sort of emphasizing them in this way. It's very engaging. And as I imagine it too, in the context of like almost like I'm imagining like for some reason like a rock and roll context. I'm imagining like a drummer, like
totally.
just like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
with the driving, I guess that would be eighth notes or 16th notes or something. But
yeah.
but yeah, it's a wonderful piece. It
Thank you.
and it makes me think just about don't know why I'm riffing on this. I don't know what your relation. I mean, clearly your brother and you have the relationship where you can play music together. But I'm sure there's been battles at times, over a Lego or a Hot Wheel
Sure,
at some
sure.
point. But it's I don't know why I'm inspired to talk about this. It's sort of like a timeless aspect of music that you can represent uh, interpersonal conflict, and that we liked that. We like the rap battle. We like the jazz battle. Where you're
Yeah,
riffing off each other's things.
yeah,
But it's always interesting in music how you have the opportunity to make beauty out of it, right? Like
yeah.
want to listen to it because there's beauty in it. There's beauty in contradiction and but also in engagement and interaction. I don't know if you have anything to say on that. I could say more, but
No, no, I
yeah,
think I think that's totally you hit a really spot on, aspect about music in general, and especially the classical canon. As classical performers, the pedestal is, kind of like the composer, and we act as interpreters of that music. um Brahms, for example, he in his music, there's always this internal struggle that he was always going through. Shostakovich, another composer, political struggles. So we try to, as interpreters of these music, we try to almost be actors in our music making, try to emulate those feelings that composers have to share with the audience. However, when I play with my brother, our personalities and the history between us kind of takes a little bit more of the forefront. So we actually have a lot of fun where, playing together is more so than just making music together. There's a lot of history, a lot of other things going on, put it that way.
yeah, yeah.
So,
No,
and then
I
that's
was
that's why
literally
it's so attractive for the audience, because we're able to really delve on our relationship and our personalities together on stage. So,
yes.
yeah,
Yeah, and you see that in some of these films, like I think it was Black Swan, right, where there's like
yeah,
this whole subplot, and then you see the performance, and it's kind of a compliment of it. But I was specifically imagining you could have a narrative film, where there's two people who are going through all this, and then you show the performance, and it's just sort of like yeah, it's icing on the cake of the
yeah,
whole, yeah, dramatic denouement. Um, the other thing that I wanted to just highlight, just because I think it's interesting about this whole concept of music and conflict, and then we also have a comment or two that I'll highlight here. But
sure,
I heard someone frame conflict as uh, if you're in a conflict and you're feeling very attached to your perspective, it's interesting to zoom out and imagine a conflict between two people or multiple people as its own entity that's just trying to resolve itself, right? So if you've ever had that circumstance where you might ask somebody, should I have a Snickers bar or a Butterfinger? And they say, Butterfinger. And you're like, why Butterfinger? You start arguing with them back and forth about what it's going to be. And it becomes, it's not really about that other person. They're just acting as a foil for you to work out the decision that gets made. Um, and it's just another reflection of that concept of conflict, having a certain beauty and function to it, and like seeing it in music that way.
Totally, totally.
So Johann just had this one-off comment that I thought was interesting. You're so lucky in a sense being able to always play the same instrument. You get to know it. Does it affect your playing when you play with pianos that piano by piano often have very difficult sound? Is there such a thing as an ideal piano sound for collaborative music making?
Ah, that's a great question. One of the things that, in a way, I feel lucky that I play the violin, that I'm able to practice on the same instrument that I rehearse with and eventually perform with, right? I can't even imagine what pianists have to go through to go from piano to piano and to be able to adjust, in a knack of time on how to use their instrument for how they communicate with the audience. um does it affect your playing when you play with yes, I mean, of course, the whole experience is about how the violin kind of blends with the piano, and not only blending, but sometimes the violin line is the forefront of the melody, sometimes the piano line is the forefront. So through experience, through I guess different challenges from what I've done over the years, I try to adjust accordingly, and that's why we have sound checks. That's why I always prefer to rehearse in the same space that we perform in, the same space meaning same piano as well, just so I get to learn about the sound more. But that's sometimes that's not realistic, right? Sometimes on tour you go from city to city and you literally just have to sound check before. So we try to do our best to accommodate the different sounds, different qualities of piano from venue to venue. And yeah, and is there an ideal piano sound for collaborative music making? An ideal piano sound. I don't think there's just one ideal sound. Obviously, it depends on the music we're playing, depends on the venue we're playing. Let's say if it's a more vibrant hall, it'd be nice if the piano's has a certain quality that enhances that aspect of the hall. It's a little bit more like a black box where the acoustics are a little bit more flat. It would be nice to have a bit more ring to the sound. So yeah, it really depends. So
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
We'll be wrapping up here pretty soon, as we typically do right here at the end of the hour. We'll jump off the Zoom generally. If you want to hop back on the same link, you and I can do a little wrap up one-on-one. But before we go, any place you want to send people, final words of wisdom, website, whatever, social
Sure.
media and stuff. What do you got?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on this channel, on this radio show. It's a pleasure to kind of just talk, as musicians and citizens of the world. And for me, I really feel grateful to be able to play music, to cultivate a musical career as part of my life. It's one of the most amazing blessings I have. So with that, I hope to communicate with more of you, to more audiences in the world through music making. So
Absolutely. Well,
yeah.
thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure. We have reached the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. And thanks again for joining us, yourself, as well as our live audience here, especially Wayne, your fellow Canadian, who decided to jump in today. This program, as always, is brought to us by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that joined us today, by signing for the session individual and make your life more convenient, subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour at just $16 a month. You get the recording of today's session in our member area, is automatic registration for each week's new session. You can sign up at bit.ly/join-PTRH. That's bit.ly/join-PTRH. Make sure you check out the podcast, the audio only version, pianotechradio.com, the blog on Substack. Follow us on the socials and check out our monthly masterclasses. We just had a wonderful masterclass where we got to study 20th century classical composition and the way that it has engaged with popular music, jazz, and blues. That was Adrian Wareham, a conductor out of Germany, now living in Italy. But yeah, wonderful stuff we're trying to bring every month. So make sure you check those things out as well. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all next week. Nikki, I'll see you in just a